So hi everyone, Anthony here from the Miro Developer Relations team. So thanks for joining today's distributed session about Miro for developers. It will be led by our two speakers that you can see on the chat here, Will and Addison, both of them developer advocate at Miro. They will show you how to build Miro applications and integrations on top of Miro. You can ask your question directly in the Q&A tab that you will find under session and on the right of the chat, and they will take time at the end to answer the questions you might have. And with that, let's get started. Will, all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. So hopefully everyone is already enjoying Distributed 22. And actually, to kick off our session, I'd like to pose a quick question, which is, have you ever been in a Miro board and wished for a specific feature or capability that didn't exist yet natively in Miro? Well, that's precisely where apps and integrations come in, and more specifically, the Miro Developer Platform, which is a way to expand on the capabilities and use cases that are already possible in Miro. So in this session, we're going to be focusing on all of the solutions available to developers to build apps and integrations on top of Miro, whether it's in a Miro board, done from a third-party app, or both, as a way to empower our global community of over 40 million users. And for those of you who might be new to the Miro platform, this webinar assumes little prior knowledge of our developer capabilities, but that's not to say it won't be also helpful for those of you who might already have some knowledge of the platform, of course, as we're going to get into some examples and inspiration. So first, a quick overview of some of the key topics for this session. So to start, Addison and I will quickly tell you a bit about us, then we'll talk high level about our platform, before diving into each of its unique components. Then we'll do some demos of each of these components, and this will be followed by an overview of our different app types, some app examples and inspiration, and finally some Q&A. So first, a bit about me. My name is Will Bishop, and I'm a developer advocate here at Miro. I'm really passionate about all things API related specifically, as well as the interconnectedness of the web, which is why I'm really excited to dive into some of the topics we have planned today about building REST integrations, Web SDK apps, and more. And then I'll kick it over to Addison to tell us a bit more about him.
Awesome, thanks, Will. Yeah, my name's Addison Schultz, also a developer advocate here at Miro. Hopefully everyone's enjoying Distributed so far. We were watching the keynote a little bit earlier before this, but I'm also excited to be here to teach all of you a little bit more about the Miro Developer Platform and hopefully inspire you to build something new.
Awesome. Thanks, Addison. So with that, I'm going to dive right into things. So as Addison mentioned, we're here to talk about the developer platform, and this refers to the combined power of our Web SDK, REST APIs, and live embed. So these are the three major components of our platform. And just to give you kind of a sneak peek, the Web SDK is a packaged solution for building a front-end app directly in Miro. So this might look like some kind of tool or plugin that you select from the toolbar in Miro, for example. We're also going to talk about the REST API, which is a comprehensive suite of APIs that allows you to build back-end oriented integrations or applications. So this might be like a script you run as a background job, or leveraged in conjunction with our Web SDK's front end. We'll get into that a bit later. And then lastly, our live embed. So this allows you to embed a Miro board directly within a site or app using a lightweight JavaScript-based solution. And this could look something like, an embedded version of Miro in Zoom, for example. So these all live separately from each other, but can be used in combination to build creative solutions that leverage one, two, or all three of them. You can get really creative with how you use each capability. So the platform was launched in May for general availability, and we've actually been expanding on these capabilities for each of these components ever since then. So just a quick note before we dive into the nitty-gritty technical details, many of the resources that we will cover today are all documented at developers.miro.com. So this will be kind of your one-stop shop for all things developer platform related here at Miro. And with that, I'll hand it over to Addison to start diving into our first component, which is the Web SDK.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. So as Will had just mentioned, we have three main parts to the Miro Developer Platform. And the first one that we're going to dive into a little bit is going to be the Web SDK. So the Web SDK is a JavaScript web-based library that allows you to interact with a Miro board either directly from the browser console, which I'm going to dive into in just a minute, but it also allows you to build fully capable apps directly in Miro boards. Chances are you've probably seen some of our SDK apps before if you've been in Miro and you've used any of the integrations available from the plugin window. But in order to get started and even try out the Web SDK, all you need is a Miro account and an open Miro board. And I'm going to dive in and show you a little bit of what that looks like. But a little bit first on what an app looks like. As I mentioned, you probably used one before if you've used any of the apps in the sidebar. So they do live in the sidebar over here. And they can contain custom UI. So as I mentioned before, it's basically just a web app that's running inside of Miro, but the SDK part of it allows you to tap into some of the Miro specific functions like adding sticky notes, zooming around the viewport, or even communicating between different items on the board if you want to store data, etc. So most of these apps, again, are pretty unique in the sense that they allow you to really extend the way that Miro works, and you can really customize it to however the way that you want to work. But in order to get started, we're going to dive into actually using some of the commands and show you how you can test out some of these if you're interested in exploring a little bit and just testing out the commands directly from a Miro board. So here's how it's going to look. So I'll just give a quick explanation and dive into it afterwards. We're going to open up a Miro board. As you see, I already have a sandbox open and ready for us to dive into. We're going to open up the developer console. We're going to grab some of the sample code from our SDK quick start and basically paste it in and watch it happen. And I'll help everyone navigate kind of the documentation so we all know where to look. Something else that I do want to mention is I'm using Chrome right now, but if you're using a different browser, chances are the flow to open the developer console it's quite similar. If not, let us know if you're having troubles or are interested in learning more. We'd be happy to help you in the chat. So as Will mentioned as well, the first resource that I want to share is our developer documentation. You can head to developers.miro.com to learn a little bit more about the developer platform in general, but also specifically about the different components that we're going to be talking about today. And the first one is the Web SDK. So we're going to navigate to the Web SDK section up here. This will bring us down to a little bit more information about the SDK in general, but also we'll find a SDK reference for all of the different things that we can interact with and use on the Miro board. So for instance, you might be familiar with a lot of these components from a normal Miro board, like a sticky note, a shape, or even an image. And we can add and use all these things directly from the SDK or from the console, which is what I'm going to show in just a minute. So now that we kind of know where we need to be looking for some of the code snippets and the information about the SDK in general, we're going to head over to a sandbox, or basically just a new Miro board, so we can actually interact with the SDK in general. Something else that I want to mention very quickly, because you'll probably notice that I have a big developer team watermark on this board. If you're going to be interested in building any apps on top of the Miro Developer Platform, you are going to also need a developer team. You can find all this information directly from our documentation. If you actually go right up to the homepage, you'll be able to create your own developer team and start building right away from the docs. So again, if this is your first time and you're a little bit new, make sure you head here and start building to build some cool apps. But within our developer team, this is kind of a staging environment. You can also it also has all the same capabilities of a normal Miro board. But like I mentioned, I'm going to test out some of the commands. So I'll head to the view menu, head over to developer, and open up the JavaScript console. I'm also going to clear out some of these errors. Let me also do this. So right inside of the console, we can go ahead and paste any of the code snippets that we see from the SDK documentation. So just as a very brief and quick example, we're going to add a sticky note to the board. So we can go ahead and click this little copy button. You'll see that this is just a little bit of JavaScript that we can customize. So if we want to add different content, change the style, or even add the position, we can do all of that within the call that we're doing. But I copied it to the clipboard. I'm going to head over here, paste it in. Let me also make this just a little bit smaller. And let me type a new message. What I'm also doing is adding this to a variable, and I'm logging this out in the console afterwards. So we'll see the response that we get returned after we add this to the board. But after clicking enter, you'll see obviously that it adds a sticky note to the center of my board. And it's the center because we added it as 0, 0 coordinate-wise. And if we open up the response, we'll see all the different information about who created it with my user ID, height, positioning information, and also the ID of the actual item that was added. And these are important, the response, because if you are going to start to make some more complex apps, you're probably going to want to reference the items that you're adding to the board in order to, communicate with each other and also maybe move some things around depending on what you're trying to do. So this is, again, a very, very quick tutorial on how to just use the Web SDK very quickly. But as I mentioned, if you are going to be building an app, you're going to be using a lot of these same commands and same calls, but in a different context, basically a web app. I'm going to show a little bit about that afterwards. But I also wanted to mention one other thing that's specific to the Web SDK that I think is pretty powerful, and hopefully will give you some more ideas on how to use the Web SDK yourself. So not only can we, and again, I'm just referencing the documentation and all this, but not only can we add different items to a Miro board using the SDK, we're also able to manipulate things like the viewport or the board UI. And this is really, really powerful because this allows you to tap into things like, the different side panels or modals that you might see working from other apps, but also things like the viewport. So if you want to add an item and then zoom the viewport to that item, so whenever you add something, it's always in view for the user. The SDK comes with a set of powerful commands that lets you manipulate the board and make the user experience for your users really, really great. So we're going to dive into some SDK apps in just a minute. But what I'm going to do is actually pass it back over to Will so he can talk a little bit about the next component, which is going to be the REST API.
Awesome. Thanks, Addison. Just go ahead and quickly share my screen.
And I will stop sharing mine.
Oops, one moment here. All right. So as Addison was just saying, in addition to our Web SDK, we're going to dive into the capabilities of our REST API now. A couple of quick prerequisites. So similar to the Web SDK, you're going to need a Miro account. But for the REST API, you're also going to need a developer team and our API reference. But first, let's talk quickly about what does a REST API app actually look like. So while a lot of REST integrations can have a UI and are often integrated in another product, a REST integration could also live alone and run in the background as a script, for example. Typically, REST API integration is going to be best suited for backend-oriented jobs that run at a regular cadence. So you might be importing data from a CSV each morning or some kind of regular job. But okay, now that we have a little bit of a background, let's cover the workflow for calling the Miro REST API. So I'm just going to quickly run through what this looks like, and then I'll go through it in detail. So we'll start by creating a dev team in Miro. After that, we're going to create a developer app, which will generate our credentials for going through the OAuth flow. We'll get an access token. After that, we'll open up a Miro board, and then we'll use our API documentation to actually make a request directly from our docs. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and actually dive in here. So I'm going to start by going to developers.miro.com. And from here, you'll actually be able to create a dev team and start the flow to build a developer app simply by clicking on the Build Your App button. If you already have a developer team created, it'll take you directly to your existing team, like in my case. But if you didn't have a developer team created yet, it would prompt you to create a team and name it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to agree to the terms of service here, and I'm going to create a new developer app. So I'm just going to call this my test app. And I want to make sure that I install it under my developer team. In my case, that's called dev team. And then for this next checkbox, you want to make sure that if you're using something in production, you're checking off to expire the user token. If you don't, it means the token will be available without an expiration date, which is a bit of a security vulnerability. For my purposes of demoing today, it's not important, but just to keep in mind for the future. So once we've created this app, we can see that a client ID and a client secret are generated, and these are going to be leveraged as part of the OAuth flow for generating our access token. And there's several fields in here that are specific to the REST API integration, and some that are specific to the Web SDK. So I'm just going to call out the ones that are most important for the OAuth flow. So that would be the redirect URI, which is required for working with the REST API. So for this, I'm just going to use localhost. And keep in mind that this is the only HTTP endpoint that you can use here. Otherwise, it needs to be HTTPS. Make sure you hit add. If you don't hit add, it won't be recognized. So once we've got our redirect URI in there, the next thing that's required for the OAuth flow is to select the scopes for our app. So for today's purposes, I'm going to do boards read and boards write. And these scopes are essentially, for anyone who's not familiar with OAuth, they're letting us know exactly what parts of someone's Miro account we have access to when using the REST API. So in this case, if someone approves or gives consent to our app, we'll be able to read and write boards from that user. And these are the only required fields to get us started. So now I'm going to install the app and get an access token. And you can do that right here from the UI. I'm going to select the dev team that I created originally, or if it's the first time you've created it, just make sure it's the same team you made earlier. Oops. Hit add and allow, and you'll see an access token is generated right here. So what's happening here in the background is the OAuth flow is running on the back end, and we're generating this token for you all in the front end. But if you were a developer building your own REST integration, you would want to manage the OAuth flow on your own, and of course not directly through the UI here. This is just kind of here for ease of access and testing. So once I've copied this token, I can go ahead and close this, and we're actually ready to make a request directly from our API documentation. So I'm going to go back to developers.miro.com. And as we were saying before, this is where all of our guides and tutorials and reference exists. So I'm going to go to our API reference. And for today's demo, I'm just going to create a shape on a Miro board. So I'm going to go to our shapes set of endpoints and go to the create shape item endpoint. So the first thing I want to mention is that our docs are interactive, which means that you can make requests directly from the documentation here without needing to use anything like Postman or the command line. So we make it very easy for you all. And I've already copied the authorization token that I just got. So I'm going to paste that in here in the upper right-hand corner where we see the word bearer. And this will allow us to actually make the request from the docs. And you can see we have a few different fields that we have to fill out. But I'm just going to create a simple shape, perhaps a circle, and say, hello distributed. And the other thing we need is for the request URL, we need a board ID. So under the same team that you created your app, you want to make sure that you open up a Miro board, and you're going to actually pull the board ID directly from the URL here. So going back to the docs here, I can add that here, and it dynamically updates on the right-hand side, and it also encodes the URL just to be safe. So we have all the required fields filled out. We can see we've got our sandbox board open. So let's go ahead and give this request a try. So we see we've got a 200 response here. And if we go back to the board, we've got a nice circle here. And yeah, this is a very basic kind of example of making a request to the REST API. And doing it from the documentation. But it's really just kind of the tip of the iceberg of what you can accomplish using the REST API and our docs. So actually, I'm going to hand it back over to Addison now to jump into our live embed.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. So as you can see, we already have two pretty powerful parts of the Miro Developer Platform, stuff that you can build UI with and interact with the board directly on a Miro board, but also through other ways like integrations using the REST API like Will was mentioning. But the third piece and third component of our Miro Developer Platform is a feature that we call Live Embed. I'll mention as well, you can find all the documentation for this on developers.miro.com right in the navigation bar under Live Embed. But Live Embed basically allows you to use Miro boards anywhere. It's a really, really nice feature. You've probably actually seen these in the wild before as well, if you've used integrations like the one we have with Zoom or even the one that we have with Hopin. So really cool. And there's a couple different components that come with the live embed option as well. So the most basic one is basically the direct link live embed. So if you just take a Miro board and head to the share menu, you can basically embed that in any web-based tool or web-based like website. We also have different options as well, such as options for registered Miro users if you want to launch like a boards picker. So if someone's already logged into a different tool or service, you'll be able to let them basically pick from a list of their boards because it's linked up to their account. And finally, though, if you are using a tool or service that that you don't have an account with, we also do allow you to embed Miro boards without having a Miro account. So you can use the Miro board anonymously if you want to do a quick planning session using any of the video conferencing tools that we mentioned before and many others. Again, make sure you head to the documentation. There's a lot of really cool things that we have coming with Live Embed in the future, but also we're really excited to see the types of things that you can build, not only with Live Embed, but also with the other two pieces of our developer platform, the Web SDK and the REST API. And with that, that's where we kind of wanted to spend the next couple sections of our presentation on, is hopefully we can inspire you by showing you some of the different types of apps that we've built, but also seen our community build using the Miro Developer Platform. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go ahead and look at a few different use cases. One moment here. All right, so time to dive into some different use cases. Oops, 1 second. Need to go back to presenter mode. All right. So the first kind of use case that I want to talk about is something that we use internally, and we call it our Miro Asset Catalog. I want to set the stage a little bit, and chances are you've probably also run into this situation, but maybe you're making a presentation in Miro and you need some of your brand assets. You know, they might live in your design tool. Maybe they're living in a folder on your computer or somewhere on the cloud. But the deal is you probably have lots of different places where these are, and you aren't always sure if they're up to date or even compliant with the latest brand standards. We run into this all the time at Miro, especially when we're building presentations exactly like the one that we're presenting today. So we've decided to put the Miro Developer Platform to the test and build internally an asset catalog that's hooked up to our internal digital asset manager, or DAM solution, which is Binder. So basically, Binder is a tool that our brand team uses to store all of the official assets that we can use publicly. And they have an API that allowed us to integrate it with the Web SDK to build an app. So anytime that we want to use any assets that they provide for us, especially, again, like when we're building presentations or slide decks, we have them directly in the Miro board, and there's no more endless tabs open in a browser so we can go ahead, and we're getting lost. So let me kind of talk a little bit about how it's built. Again, this is mostly using the Web SDK alongside a couple other technologies that are listed here. So the entire UI that I'm about to show you is built using the Miro Web SDK. We are using the Binder API, which is, again, the digital asset manager provider, so where the assets actually live. It's built in a language called TypeScript, but the framework that's being used is React. I do want to mention that the Web SDK is a web-based it's a web-based tool, so you can use any framework that you'd like as long as it runs on the web. But this one specifically was built in React. We're also using Netlify for storage and using serverless functions to kind of host everything and get it running. And we also are using a framework called Vite to do a lot of the front end bootstrapping. If you are going to follow along and create any of your own apps, you'll most likely see a lot of these similar configurations for any of the apps that we're doing for examples, but also through one of the CLI tools, which I'm going to mention a little bit later. But let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like in practice. So I'm going to head back to the sandbox team that I have, zoom out just a little bit, and you'll see that the asset catalog that I was just mentioning is available right here on the side. So it's going to ask me to sign in, but I already signed in earlier in the session. So this is actually pulling now all of our brand assets directly from binders. So again, I don't have to go and navigate a bunch of different tabs to find what I want. For instance, if I want any of our icons, we can load this up very quickly and even search through them as well. So maybe I want something like a static graph. We have it, and we can drag it onto the canvas right away. So things like this, especially using the Web SDK, make everything like this really, really possible and really fast for us to develop and use new ideas. Again, we wanted to build this to kind of test if this would be an app that our company would use. And it turns out that we were right, and a lot of people are using this internally. And we've seen some other variations with this across other companies as well. So this is just one example of a pretty simple but useful app that you can build in Miro. But I want to highlight one other app that might also be useful for you if you are interested in building more of like an integration-based application. And this is one that we call the Miro and GitHub two-way sync. So this is basically an integration between a GitHub repository that I'll show you in a minute, and also a Miro board. Essentially, what this app allows you to do is import different issues from a GitHub project into a Miro board. They'll be imported as an entity called app cards, which are customizable cards in Miro. If you've been using cards in the past, you might already be familiar with them. But what's really cool about this is it actually hooks them up in a way that allows you to sync data between them. So let's say that we import a card from GitHub and we do a little bit of planning, but then we update some of this information in Miro. Well, this app allows you to take that information and actually sync it back with GitHub. So there's no more copying and pasting all of the data that might have been decided upon in a planning session in Miro, because it's all synced up automatically. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. It'll make a little bit more sense if I just show you. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually add a new Kanban board so we can kind of see what this looks like in practice. So maybe you and your team are doing a planning session. I'll delete the card that's added here. And you want to do a little bit of organization with maybe or triaging of some issues that you have in GitHub, which is actually a perfect use case for a tool like this. Well, first of all, I'm going to open up the app called GitHub Cards. And I've already logged in and signed in. So basically what it allows me to do is choose any of these issues that I just mentioned from a GitHub repository. So I'm going to go ahead and just import this one called done. And it automatically will add it in as an app card to my Miro board. What's cool is these are also fully compatible with things like Kanban boards or grids. So if you want to, again, do this planning, it works perfectly, and we can move it around like this. I want to show you where this data actually is being stored as well. So again, where these issues are being pulled from. I have these hooked up to a repository that I have under my personal account called GitHub Cards. And if we add the issues, you'll see that we have all of these issues that I just mentioned right here. And if I take a look under the projects, go to Classic, we'll see that I have these listed under things like to do, in progress, and done. And this one also says, welcome to the Miro Developer Platform. And for instance, if I actually head into here and open up this customizable modal, I can maybe do something like update the description and say, hello from distributed. We'll go ahead and save this. This will be updated in the description. If we zoom in, we should also see it there as well. But basically, this is set up in a way that will sync and update all of this in real time. So now we see this, this updated description right in GitHub. So again, you can do all the planning with your team as you want directly in Miro, and be assured that it'll be synced up with GitHub. Now, the main reason, well, actually, let me dive in real quickly and just talk a little bit about how it's built. This is also using the Miro Web SDK for the UI, as you just saw. It's actually also using the REST API, Miro's REST API for the two-way sync capabilities. So as Will was mentioning a little bit before, you can actually use the SDK, the REST API, and also the live embed all together or separately, depending on your use case for the Miro Developer Platform. I'm also using the GitHub REST API in order to sync things with GitHub. It's also built in TypeScript and React. And it's also using a database called Supabase to store information about the card mapping and also the users who are signing in to use it. And it's also being hosted on Netlify for serverless functions and also just the hosting in general. Now, again, the main reason that I wanted to kind of demo this and hopefully inspire you to build your own integration is because we've realized that data management and also planning in Miro is a huge workflow that a lot of teams rely on. But we've seen that a lot of teams have always kind of gotten stuck when they've maybe done a planning session and needed that information back in their original tool, where the rest of the company is maybe using as their source of truth. So with a app like this, you can start to imagine the different possibilities of the app integrations that you could build with other project management tools. So again, this is just one integration or an example with GitHub, but you can start to think of other project management tools and how they would interact with Miro in the same way. We're going to go through a few resources towards the end of this webinar, but we have all of this code and guides on this all open source. So if you are interested in building this yourself, you'll be able to set it up and hopefully follow the guides to make some really, really powerful integrations. But enough about kind of the apps that we build internally. We also have a thriving community of developers that are also building apps, which we want to start to highlight as well. So back to you, Will.
Awesome. Thanks, Addison. Yeah, so as you were saying, and as you've been showing, we've seen some great examples of kind of the art of the possible. Now we want to take a moment to share inspiration from members of the Miro developer community. So first, we have the story of Vedran, one of the founders of Blossom. So Vedran has built both the Super Search and Easy Translator apps on the Miro marketplace currently. And in his own words, there's a lot of opportunity on the platform. As an early adopter, Vedran successfully managed to build several apps on the platform. So he's really a true success story for maximizing our capabilities to complement end users' experiences of working in Miro. And in particular, both of the apps that Vedran built were actually based on inspiration from our community wish list, which we'll show in a second. But he really came to Miro, saw what was possible with the platform, and then went directly to the community of our end users to see what were the top requested features and what were people looking for. And he built apps around these capabilities. So those were things like find and replace, which is part of his Super Search app, and a translation method, which is part of the Easy Translator. So a great example of somebody who, got into the platform early and was able to do awesome things. So I definitely encourage you to check out both of those apps if you get a chance. So next, we have the story of Max Harper, founder of Refractive Strategy. So he founded a company, a team that builds on Miro full time. And another early adopter, Max has built several apps and plugins on the Miro platform, like Power Pack, and most recently the Colors plugin available as part of it. And his creations and his team's creations are just another excellent example of how custom apps can empower really specific workflows and leverage custom logic to elevate end users' experiences in Miro. And you can also find his apps on the marketplace as well. Really encourage you to check those out, especially really excited by the Power Pack Colors edition most recently. And as a bit of a teaser, you also don't want to miss Max's own session tomorrow. As part of Distributed, he'll be talking about building apps on Miro in a session of his own. So that's tomorrow as well. For these developers from our community who bet on and build on Miro, several new opportunities have been presented to them. So if we go to the next slide here, we'll see that, for example, Vedran, wrote a highly compelling blog post on his journey building on the platform and shared his experience with actually, not only building these apps, but monetizing them. And you can read the full story that he wrote up on our blog at the Miro Engineering blog. And then we can also see another example of this in Max, who, just like I was saying, is hosting a session at Distributed tomorrow. So, it's not just a community of developers who are simply building things. They're betting on Miro, they're building on Miro, but they're also contributing to Miro and getting engaged in really unique ways. And ultimately, both of these developers built apps that focused on common requests from members of the Miro end user community. So if you're looking for ideas to get started on an app of your own, our community wish list is a great place to start. So this is a place where any Miro end user can go and upvote feature requests, submit ideas, and it's a great place to see high level what Miro users are looking for and what are the most requested things. So it can serve as some great inspiration. So yeah, with that in mind, I'll kind of keep going in the theme of, creating an app and where you might actually deploy it. So what's the best way to share an app with our community of Miro end users after you create it? If we go to the next slide here, there's actually 2 ways to create an app and share it. So depending on your use case, you can either create a public Miro app or a private app to make your apps accessible to your desired audience or end users. So public apps are intended to be widely disseminated and can be hosted on the Miro marketplace. So that's miro.com/marketplace. And that's a place where any Miro end user can go to leverage that app, install it, and have it accessible from their Miro boards or their workflows, whatever they're doing. Or the second option here is a private app. And this is in the case where maybe you only want to distribute to certain customers or specific end users. So this is not something you publish on the marketplace, but you've created some kind of custom solution and you want specific people to have access to it. So those are the 2 kind of ways, high level, to share your creations once you've actually built them. And yeah, now that we have a better sense of what's possible here and seeing what other community members have done, I'll kick it back over to Addison to guide us on actually starting your own app.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. So yeah, as you mentioned, you hopefully should have a good idea of what the rest of our community is building, some of the things that we're building internally, maybe where you can publish them, and even a good sense of the different pieces of our developer platform. But I want to talk about a lot of the resources that you have available to you if you're interested in really kickstarting your journey on the Miro Developer Platform. The first thing that I want to highlight is a command line interface tool that we have called Create Miro App. You can find it on npmjs.com. And it basically allows you to bootstrap a project specifically for the Miro Developer Platform. We have a lot of different frameworks available to you. You can just do it in vanilla JavaScript or TypeScript. You can do it in React and even Vue. There's also some options for full stack apps if you are interested in doing more than just something for the Web SDK. If you're interested in using pieces of the REST API, Miro's REST API, we also have just launched a new client library, which is super exciting, which allows you to tap into Miro's API without having to think about a lot of the extra kind of setup, because we do help and do a lot of that for you. We also have a ton of videos and guides available to you, both on our developer YouTube, which you can check out directly from our documentation, or visit any of the guides that we have available to you also on our documentation. So if you are visiting developers.miro.com, you should find a bunch of different guides depending on the different types of things that you're interested in doing. But not only do we have guides on setting it up your own, we also have a huge repository of open source code that you can go ahead and just copy and paste for yourself. So even the different apps that I had just shown earlier, such as the GitHub app cards, and also the Miro asset catalog, we've open sourced these completely for you guys. So if you're interested in taking and building on top of these, or constructing your own, make sure you visit some of the guides, resources, and even sample code to start building yourself. Cool. So again, we have lots of resources for you, and we hope that you can take this and build something great.
Awesome. Thanks, Addison. Yeah, so to kind of round things out a bit, a quick look first back at what we explored today. So we covered 3 capabilities of the Miro Developer Platform. That was the Web SDK, the REST API, and the Live Embed. And just to quickly summarize, again, the Web SDK, best for using our package solution for building a front-end app directly in Miro, accessible from a board. REST API, our comprehensive suite of APIs that allow you to build more back-end oriented integrations, may have a UI, may not. And our Live Embed, which allows you to embed a Miro board directly into an app or a site using our lightweight JavaScript-based solution. So again, all of these can exist separately from each other, or can be used in combination to create really creative solutions. So if you're feeling inspired, then we definitely encourage you to come build the next big thing with us. Get your hands dirty and leverage some of the resources that Addison and I have walked through today. But if you forgot anything from today, or you have questions, or you just want to brainstorm, you want to get inspiration, feedback, support, come join us on Discord, where Addison and I will be there to help you out, support you, answer questions. But it's not just Addison and I, it's actually our community of developers that are already building on Miro too. So it's a great place to be a part of a community who can support you in starting your journey on the Miro Developer Platform. So with that, we'll wrap it up here, and we'll take the remaining time to get to some of the questions in the chat. So I think one of the... Oh yeah, good. I think one of the first questions was, do you have a place to find out about upcoming features? And yes, we definitely do. So we have a developer roadmap, which you can access at developers.miro.com. And actually, I can quickly share my screen and just show you where you can find this. So if you go to our portal here, you'll see up here on the top navigation, there's a roadmap button. And this is where you can find feature requests, things that are in progress, as well as recently released features. And you can also go to a feature request, and you can actually upvote it by clicking on one of these buttons, and you'll see other people have voted for it too. And this is something we use to basically justify to our product teams and engineering teams what makes sense and what to prioritize. So it's a great place to have your voice heard as a member of our community.
Cool. And I think there was another one as well on the different types of what type of plan you need if you're interested in using the platform. And the good thing is you don't need a special plan if you're interested in using the developer platform. So you can start already using it if you have a free plan. A few things of note, you will need a developer team in order to start building apps and actually hosting them and submitting them to the marketplace. But that's totally also included with even our free plan. I will also mention, though, that we do have a set of enterprise-specific functionalities, mostly via our REST API. But for the most part, you can already do everything you need using the normal API. But just keep that in mind. If you are exploring the documentation, we do have an enterprise-only section, which you might run into.
Awesome. And then I think there was one other question in the chat after the asset catalog demo that you did, Addison. And the question was, what about fonts? Could you do something similar and pull something like that through?
It's a good question. So you are able to use custom fonts within the Web SDK panel itself. But unfortunately, it's not possible right now to use custom fonts on the Miro board. That being said, definitely is a good idea. And maybe it could be something that is released in the upcoming future.
Yeah, and actually don't hesitate to put it on the feature requests as well, because yeah, the more feature requests we get, the more we can entertain things like that too.
Cool. And with that, I think we are pretty much right on time. Thank you again, everyone, for joining in. And yeah, joining us for the session. Hopefully you learned something new, and hopefully you got inspired and also excited to build something, whether it's for your team privately or even for our marketplace and the rest of our community. So yeah, we hope to see you in our community. Make sure you join us in Discord if you're interested in talking with us a little bit more, have any specific questions, or even just exploring what the rest of our community is doing. But again, with that, I think we're about to log off, and we hope that everyone enjoys the rest of Distributed 22. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.